What's up, Truth About Tupac Movement? It's your boy Asher Underwood. I am here in Baltimore, Maryland for the first time ever, repping my city of grind, Compton. You already know what it is. Shouts out to Tyree and the whole crew of City of Grind. But I'm here, bro, in Baltimore right now. And I'm with Travis Kitchens, y'all. I'm with Travis Kitchens. This man, you gotta know about what he's doing for Tupac's legacy here in Maryland as an academic, as a scholar, as a researcher, as a writer. He's got some articles out in the Baltimore Sun. He's looking to make a day, an established day for Tupac here in Baltimore. I'm gonna let him give you a little more information about it, but I just wanted to introduce you to Travis Kitchens, man. Picked me up from Baltimore Airport this morning, showed me around the town, took me to Baltimore School of Arts, took me to where Tupac lived as a kid, 3955 Greenmount, and then took me to lunch, man. And now, about to go pick up the rental car and continue on the journey. But I just want to stop and introduce you to him, let him tell you a little bit about his work and specifically what his goals are for Pac's message to help get people reading and make reading cool again. Long introduction.
It's all good.
How you feeling, Travis?
I'm feeling great, man. It's good to connect with you.
Man, it's good to connect with you as well, man. Can you give us a little, get the fans a little information about your project and maybe how they can support you and support the project?
Well, I just had a letter to the mayor yesterday. We got a new mayor, Catherine Pugh, here in Baltimore, and I'm petitioning her to designate June 16th Tupac Shakur Day. And really to honor Tupac and his time here in Baltimore. He lived here in 1984 to 1988. And he lived at 3955 Greenmount Avenue, where we were just at. And I think he's a great symbol of he's a unique symbol of the relationship between social consciousness, art, and reading. And reading as a revolutionary act. That it's not something that, it's not your vegetables that your parents are trying to make you to eat, but it's a way of weaponizing your mind. And it's a way of shaping your mind into a tool of self-defense. And with Donald Trump being elected president, there's no better time to start reading and learn your history and learn the history of resistance and the history of resistance that Tupac's music is couched in, the tradition of agitation and resistance that Tupac so honorably and carried on until his tragic death.
Man, that's deep. I like how you coined that, history of agitation and resistance. You know, and you're right, there is no better time with the Trump presidency, with social media being as rampant as it is, and people, especially young people's attention span seems to not all be there, and you approaching reading not as, you know, your parents trying to make you eat your vegetables, but as weaponizing your mind, which is how Pac and Afeni, rest in peace to both of them, you know, she definitely trained and raised him up to weaponize his mind with knowledge and power.
Right. Yeah. And the tradition, I mean, the tradition I put him in is in the tradition of course, Nat Turner, who he was going to make a film about, but the man someone who probably, we don't know for sure, but very likely he read David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. So I put him in the tradition of agitation of David Walker and the Methodist Church in North Carolina and Virginia. And, you know.
Can you speak a little about, this is very interesting for those of you that don't know about you were doing a sort of an analogy between the Tupac and the Biggie battling and Edgar Allan Poe and Longfellow. Can you talk a little about that?
Right. Well,
those that don't know that historical context.
Here in Enoch Pratt Free Library, when Tupac was 13, him and another local rapper, his friend Mouse Man, entered a rap competition at Enoch Pratt Free Library. I think they won, but the rap that he wrote in longhand is over at the library right now in the vault with original writing by Edgar Allan Poe and the Baltimore Sun columnist, famous columnist, H.L. Mencken. And if you know their work, if you know about Edgar Allan Poe, he was an extremely bitter, he's a brilliant guy, but he was extremely bitter and he was extremely vicious in his criticism of his of his contemporaries, who he believed were turning art and poetry into something just to make money. Longfellow was the first poet to really turn his poetry into a business. And since Edgar Allan Poe was broke and he was better, he was fucking pissed off about it. So so I put him in that tradition of Edgar Allan Poe and H.L. Mencken. If you haven't read H.L. Menken's columns, go online to the Baltimore Sun, go into the archive and read H.L. Mencken. H.L. Mencken said nobody ever went broke underestimating the stupidity of the American public, but he said a lot of other brilliant shit too. He covered the Tennessee Snopes trial. There's a book on that you can get on Amazon. You can get a collection of his work. He was a brilliant dude and a vicious dude. So Tupac's work being in there is he's certainly within the tradition. Those three people. And like I was talking about David Walker, if you haven't read David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, you've got to read that. Even his fellow abolitionists like Benjamin Lundy, Samuel Snowden were like, whoa, similar to Tupac. Hey, this guy's a little bit too radical. You're riling people up. He was accused of exaggerating the suffering of black people and slaves, exaggerating the suffering. So I do a comparison between David Walker and Tupac's first two records and being attacked by Dan Quayle. I really focused down on him being attacked by Dan Quayle and him saying Tupac's music has no place in society, and his demonization of Tupac is within a tradition of white supremacy that we're only talking 150 years difference and it's the same shit.
Man, that is that's a pretty astounding analysis. Can you give them a little history of your actual your publications in the newspapers and like sort of your work here and relationships to the city and things?
Yeah, I've been living in Baltimore from 10 years. I'm originally from Western Kentucky, 2 hours north of Nashville. I'm a self-taught writer, self-taught videographer, self-taught music producer, and I've been writing for the paper for a few years. And I write about everything from psychedelics to music. I grew up on rap, but I've never written an article about rap. I mainly was doing reviews on country music. I started out writing a column on country music and not cowboy hat, line dancing bullshit, real shit like Tupac, like Hank Williams. I believe Hank Williams was the first rock star and Tupac was the last rock star. They both died when they were 26. Hank Williams overdosed in the back of a Cadillac, New Year's 1953, on the way to a New Year's show. But lots of parallels between Hank Williams and Tupac. But yeah, I started out writing about country music, and actually the very first article I wrote for the Baltimore City paper was banned and censored whenever Under Armour, the company Under Armour, the Baltimore Arena, Live Nation, the ticketing company Live Nation, and a bunch of corporations complained about a vicious review I wrote about a terrible country music singer / rapper named Jason Aldean, who's so that's my history there, and I became known writing here after writing this review of this horrible country singer. But since then, I've been writing about psychedelics and music and culture and philosophy and folding a lot of reading and research into of connecting the counterculture of the 1960s to now. I've been doing a whole lot of articles researching the counterculture of the 1960s and the resistance that was born there and the role that psychedelic drugs played in the counterculture and in the birth of technology, and just the way that psychedelics are so intertwined in everything we do. And then I'm researching Tupac, childhood hero, and I found out, he's fascinated with Aldous Huxley. He read Timothy Leary's classic book, The Psychedelic Experience.
Shouts out to Layla Steinberg, who revealed that information, and the Thug Angel documentary, and QD3 and Tracy Danielle Robinson. Gotta appreciate y'all for getting that information out there, as well as Michael Eric Dyson and Holler If You Hear Me references Layla, which was a part of my thesis, my undergraduate and graduate thesis, connecting a lot of people. One of the things that I was wanting to do with my thesis, Travis, is sort of show to the consciousness of Tupac beyond sort of just the hip-hop and or the gangster thug image that people perceive him as, or even the black nationalist traditional revolutionary consciousness, of which he definitely had or was a part of. But like you said, he was hip to not only music from different types all across the spectrum, but as was referenced by Michael Eric Dyson and Holler If You Hear Me and in Thug Angel, Pac was also delving into the esoteric and the metaphysical, different references of Pac that connect into that. So I think it's great that you're doing that work.
And if you look in Jasmine Guy's book, Evolution of a Revolutionary, which is a beautiful oral biography, become one of my favorite books. She's wonderful. a phenomenal writer. But Afeni mentions in there that when she was living in New York, after she dropped out of school, the performing arts school up there, she was taking LSD on the fire escapes in New York and listening to Sly Stone and Jimi Hendrix. So the Black Panthers and the whole that whole cultural matrix that was happening then. I think Tupac was also fascinated that his mother was into those drugs and the way that those drugs remove fear. You know, the very basic things that are into psychedelics, besides the way it's been branded in mainstream society of, oh, I'm seeing colors and Pink Floyd and tripping out. That's really not what it's about.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting also, and we'll talk a little about the work that you've done and are doing around psychedelic research in Johns Hopkins University. But, you know, ayahuasca comes up, and, you know, Tupac, named after Tupac Amaru, the Inca, you know, I had confirmation that the original Tupac Amaru, the Inca, was drinking the medicine. He was drinking the ayahuasca when he was warring and gunning down on the Spanish during that time, which is very fascinating in of itself. When you talk about removing a fear, overcoming death, the fear of death, and transcending and having that vision. But before we move on into some of the psychedelic conversation, I did want you to kind of extrapolate on what you were telling me in the car about Hank Williams and the reference to Hank Williams from Afeni and Briar Patch, and sort of, you know, the song that, you know, that's really kind of fascinating for those of you that don't know, Outlaw, you know.
There's a Baltimore journalist, he's dead now, I think he died in the late 90s, his name is Murray Kempton. He's a very good journalist. In fact, he's considered one of the best newspapermen. David Remnick, the editor of the New Yorker, said he is the best newspaperman since H.L. Mencken. He's also with the Baltimore Sun, and he actually started his career in Baltimore as a copy boy for H.L. Mencken. His first book was called The Briar Patch. It came out in 1977, and it covered the Panther 21 trial, of which Afeni was one of the Panther 21. He reported in the book that Afeni would goad the prosecutor, I think his last name was White, by gently whispering the lyrics to a Hank Williams song in his ear. Your cheating heart will tell on you, because he was a liar. And they put these trumped up terrorism charges on him that they had no physical evidence for. So she used to whisper in his ear, your cheating heart will tell on you, and it would drive him nuts. But Afeni was born in 1947 in Lumberton, North Carolina. That's the Inner Banks of North Carolina. The year she was born, 1947, was when Hank Williams had his first smash hit, Moving On Over. So that music obviously got stuck in her head because it was all over the South. And Hank Williams is called the Hillbilly Shakespeare for good reason. He's one of America's greatest songwriters, an American icon who also died at 26, overdosed in the back of a Cadillac, New Year's 1953. But a lot of parallels, Hank Williams being the Hillbilly Shakespeare, and Darren Bassfield calls Tupac the Shakur spear, and you know Tupac was very much into Shakespeare and his work. So and you find all the same themes that you find in Tupac's work, you find in Hank Williams' work. Tupac has Dear Mama. Hank Williams has a beautiful song called I Dreamed About Mama last night, about how she would stay up reading till they got home. They were out partying, getting fucked up, and she would wait up all night for him to come home, and she'd be sitting by the fire reading. So, you know, singer-songwriters are singer-songwriters. Tupac is an artist and a singer-songwriter in the tradition of the greatest singer-songwriters. And, you know, my opinion, Tupac has much more in common with Hank Williams and Merle Haggard than he has in common with Future or Young Thug. And I'm not dissing them, but he's a singer-songwriter in the tradition of the 1960 singer-songwriters of Don McLean, who he loved, who were majorly influenced, maybe primarily influenced by Hank Williams. So there's a direct line from Hank Williams to Tupac. And again, I think Hank Williams is widely considered the first rock and roll star. They called it rockabilly then, and I would argue that Tupac was the last rock and roll star.
Man, that's a great argument, man. Who wants to take Travis up on that argument? Comment below. Make sure you subscribe. You know, we're going to keep you up to date because Truth About Tupac Movement is going to be reporting and keeping you guys in the know of what's happening as these things are moving forward to turn June 16th into would it be a national day or what?
Well, it'll be a state holiday.
A state holiday for Maryland, the state of Maryland, June 16th. We need your support. We're going to need you to get out to vote and push pressure here in Baltimore City Council.
Send a letter to the mayor.
Send a letter to the mayor.
Catherine Pugh, P-U-G-H.
You heard that. If you're in Baltimore, you're anywhere in the country, send a letter to the mayor of Baltimore, Catherine Pugh. Tell her we need a state-recognized holiday for Tupac Shakur, June 16th, here in Baltimore. Just like we need you guys to go vote for Tupac now on Rock Hall and Fame. It's really important. Pac shouldn't be trailing Janet Jackson in these votes, y'all. Come on, let's get these votes up ASAP.
He's up against Janet Jackson?
Yeah, well,
Now,
he's up against a couple people, but yeah, she's leading him in a couple of votes, which we gotta stop, man. We need you to vote. You can vote every day. Keep voting. Share, repeat, man. So as we're talking about let's just kind of segue. This might be a separate interview for those of you who want to follow along, but I do want to ask Travis here about his work into the psychedelics research at Johns Hopkins and kind of some history around Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore and Maryland for psychedelic use, religious, psychological, these different things. What can you tell us?
Well, Maryland has a long history of psychedelic research. People started studying acid. Sandoz Laboratories in Switzerland. Albert Hofmann, of course, discovered LSD. I think it was 1940. I could be wrong on this, but it's something like 1945 or something like that. Maybe even a little bit earlier. But people started. The government here started studying psychedelics and acid, LSD, at the National Institutes of Health, government-sponsored research, which is between Baltimore and D.C. If you don't know where it's at, it's about 30 minutes from Baltimore. The National Institutes of Health. They started studying LSD there. And then it spread, more people started studying, they basically gave it out free. So people were taking acid and trying to figure out what does this shit do. Sandoz Laboratories was giving it away for free, saying, hey, what can you do with this stuff? We think there's a use for it in psychotherapy. It seems to open people's mind up, but of course the government, as always, wanted to use military uses for it. So NIH was saying, can we brainwash people with it? This is around the time of the Korean War. But the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, which is at Spring Grove Hospital, which is still here, they started doing psychedelic therapy there with alcoholics and drug addicts and with people who had terminal cancer diagnosis. And they were having miraculous success with one dose of guided psilocybin. And what they do is you wear an eye mask, you put on headphones, and there's a playlist and it's published and you can find it online. It has a lot of it starts out with a lot of classical music like Mozart and Appalachian Springs in there, and then it moves into some Indian stuff and some like 10-15 minute ragas and very long stuff that you trip out to. But basically it's an 8-hour day to where they give you acid and they isolate you with the eye mask, so it concentrates the experience inward. And basically what they're triggering is what people call a mystical experience. A book that Tupac read called Dark Night of the Soul is one of the earliest 16th century psychedelic texts, and it basically is describing a psychedelic trip. Mystical experiences do happen naturally. They can happen through alteration of diet. They can happen to people who are mentally ill. Some people that are called schizophrenic and other things, they're having brain seizures and mystical experiences all the time. Sometimes when you see somebody who think is crazy, they're actually naturally tripping their balls off. But we're sitting right by Johns Hopkins. It's right back here. You can't see it, but the main research into psychedelics is happening right back here at Johns Hopkins. There's people back there right now having mystical experiences. The religious experiences of the Bible are not happening in churches and synagogues. They're happening in research laboratories like Johns Hopkins.
They're tripping on acid right over there right now, going deep into the psyche, deep into releasing pin-up emotions, blocks, all those sort of things, man.
It's about overcoming fear. I mean, the main thing I think people should know about psychedelics is that it's about overcoming fear, the fear of death and the fear that we have in our daily lives that control. Most of our behavior is controlled by fear. We have belief systems that lie in your subconscious that basically control what we do. Psychedelics are about bringing those to the surface so that you can analyze your belief systems, analyze the things that are controlling you, a lot of times which are fear and things that we suppress. So the psychedelic therapy is a lot about triggering a mystical experience and allowing those things to come out naturally, and then doing traditional psychoanalysis and talk therapy to work through a lot of these problems. And I would highly recommend anybody that's interested in these things, look for an article called The Trip Treatment. It's in the New Yorker magazine. It's written by Michael Pollan, P-O-L-L-A, and it'll give you the whole history. And it's the real deal psychedelic stuff, like I said, without this hippie, without all the baggage of Tim Leary in the 1960s and Flower Children and Charles Manson and all this stuff.
Right. Man, that's deep, man. That is really, really deep stuff. So if they want to get at you, how do they get at you? What's the best way?
The best way to get at me is I'll just give you my email address. I don't do social media, so it's my last name dot my first name at Gmail, kitchens.travis@gmail.com. Go to Baltimore City Paper. A couple months ago was my last article was published there. It's called Escape from Planet Earth, Psychedelics, Religion, and Outlaw Scientist John C. Lilly. John C. Lilly was a scientist from St. Paul, Minnesota, who did work at the Maryland. He started at NIH. He developed the float tank, if anybody knows about the float tank. He wrote a manual for taking acid in the float tank called Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer. And in 1969, he left Maryland. He went to the Esalen Institute in Big Sur and continued his research there. He's real well known for giving acid to dolphins and attempting to communicate with dolphins. That was a big time scandal that happened in the Virgin Islands and in Miami, where he had these labs set up to where they basically flooded half the house and they were living with the dolphins. And there was a big scandal because Margaret Howe, one of the researchers, was having sexual relations with one of these dolphins, and he ended up losing his government research, but the government was paying for all this research. So
Can't
go to Baltimore.
fucking the dolphins.
So go to Baltimore City Paper and read Escape from Planet Earth.
Can't be fucking dolphins on the government money. That's psychedelics.
You lose your money. So we had to bail and go to California, where that was more accepted, I guess.
Man, that shiny, slick dolphin, she was all on it.
And you know, one of the dolphins was Flipper.
Oh!
Was Peter the Dolphin
no.
from Flipper. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, so it's crazy. There's all these coincidences.
With Flipper.
With Tupac, you gotta study the 1960s counterculture. You can't understand Tupac and what he believed unless you dig into the 1960s counterculture, because that's where Afeni's consciousness was birthed in the radical movements of the 1960s, and we better get back to some of that stuff and study what it was really about, instead of this fashion bullshit of people dancing, dressed like Black Panthers. That's all good, whatever, but let's get into the philosophy of it and see what they were actually talking about. The Black Panthers were against racism, not just to get rid of racism. They were for getting rid of racism so that poor black people and poor white people, Appalachian people, where I'm from in Kentucky, would get together, stop this bullshit, and overthrow capitalism. That's what it was all about. So we got to do it.
Bow! 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 You heard it first. TruthAboutTupac.com. It's not a movie, it's a movement, y'all. Salute. Shout out the platoon. You know who you are. You know it's coming soon. We got a little ruckus out here. It's all good, though. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you stay tuned in. Look out for Travis Kitchen's work coming soon. You can definitely get up to date here at Truth About Tupac as the state holiday for Tupac Shakur on June 16th comes about. Make sure you vote for Tupac in the Rock Hall. Make sure you stay tuned. It's not a cartoon, you goons. You're looking out. And by the way, none of this was planned. So that's how consciousness and the creator work. I'm coming into Maryland. Travis hit me with an email within 48 hours of me arriving without either of us knowing about one another or coming here. He's seen the video with John Podash and Big Frank, my homie Big Frank Alexander, rest in paradise. If it wasn't for that video, I wouldn't be here with Mr. Kitchens right now. So man, I'm glad you reached out. I really appreciate you swooping me up.
Yep.
Swooped me from the airport, gave me a full tour of Baltimore, bought me lunch, and then bless you guys with this interview. So make sure you stay tuned, make sure you subscribe. More to come. Let's make a move, man.
Right.
Pop.